Alexander of Macedon by Harold Lamb. As soon as he returned to Pella, he searched for the diviner Aristander and questioned him about Olympias's dream. This man from Telemes did not seem surprised, pointing out that other omens confirmed his mother's belief, and even Philip had a portent in a dream that he had sealed up Olympias's body when he slept with her, and the seal had borne the impress of a lion's head on it. This portent Aristander had interpreted to Philip as meaning not that he must look closely after his erotic wife, but that he must know his son would have more than mortal courage. These are portents, declared the soothsayer, that taken together may not be questioned. Philip is not your father. Well, the Bible talks about this too. It's like, it's not Jesus has the literal father in heaven, but the idea of being fathered, you become the sons of God if, it's a way of speaking. It's not the same thing as real physical parentage. Your physical parentage is the same, but soothsayers look at information. They speak to different audiences. You go to get a reading, and it depends on your clothes and how you smell and all that other stuff. A lot more, if they don't know who you are, than it does actual, information they could possibly be receiving to interpret. In some fashion, word of the diviner's announcement spread through the marketplace and hostels of Pella. People questioned the priest of the Delphic oracle, who was also waiting in Pella at that time. This agent of the Greek oracle would neither confirm nor deny the statement of Olympias and Aristander. Now, when Alexander had made the dawn sacrifice at the altar facing the east, he had to push through a crowd of servitors and slaves who waited in reverent silence for a sight of the golden-haired prince as he made sacrifice to his father Zeus. Before one moon had waxed and waned, Antipater brought Alexander a message, delivering it himself, because it came from Philip. Philip, king commander of the Macedonians, he said, without emotion, divorces Olympias, princess of Epirus, daughter of Neoptolemus. He has taken to wife Cleopatra, niece of Attalus. Chapter 3 of Book 1. Demosthenes and the graves of Chaeronea. Philip soon called his son back to the army, allowing him to serve this time with Hephaestion in the elite cavalry. During that year, the year 438 from the first Olympiad, or 338 BCE, the conflict between the Macedonian army and the Greek city-states came to a head. It was really the conflict between Philip's ambition and Demosthenes' determination, the issue being the rule of the Greek cities, because Greece as a whole did not exist. The Hellenes, separated among their dozen cities, had been united only by the shock of the World War, when the armies of the Asiatics invaded the waters and homeland. From the first meeting at the Marathon to the sea and land victories of Salamis and Plataea. When the threat of conquest ended, the Hellenic cities fell apart like the spokes of a broken wheel and involved themselves in the long civil war, which became a merciless struggle for mastery between, in one aspect, the land and sea power, the North against the South, and, in its final phase, the test of mastery between Athenians and Spartans, strangely, throughout the raids and sieges, the plague, and the final mobilization of manpower of the height of this conflict, Athens had been touched by the splendor of the age of Pericles. Then had followed the political prostration of the post-war generation, with its weight of taxation, an expanding trade, and its weak efforts to form peace leagues after a century and a half of wars. The famous city-states, dependent now on slave labor, had tried to protect themselves by professional soldiery, which could be maintained by money. Leadership had descended to individual tyrants or dictators, or to a religious council. Well, so-called religious council anyways. Towards the end of this decline, Philip of Macedon displayed the astute leadership lacking since the death of Pericles, while the Athenian orator Demosthenes used his great persuasive power in order to rouse the city-states to their danger. The conflict for control now centered on these two individuals, Philip, opportunist and realist, seizing every holder upon the disorganized cities of Hellas, posing as a protector of the religious council, champion of the Delphic shrine, and benefactor of Demos, the common man, and Demosthenes, lashing at the inertia of now wealthy Athenians, whipping up the ghosts of the marathon, calling upon a true citizens' army to defend the last of the democracies. In this death duel between two personalities, the actual antagonists seemed to be two irreconcilable ideas: the fading concept of the free city-state and the nascent concept of monarchy. For Demosthenes, in his Philippics, argued not only so much against human Philip as against the incarnation of power in Philip. If Philip were to vanish tomorrow, you'd find yourself another Philip. I want an army of the Republic. Did the Athenians fear Philip? Demosthenes lashed their fear with scorn. Was Philip a strategist? So was a wolf, slinking out of sight, feeding on dead bodies. Was he handsome and dark-drinking? So was a woman, and a sponge. Would the immortal entities watching from the skies bestow favor upon such a lecher, a schemer, a bloodsucker? Already Demosthenes explained. The gods had vouchsafed an omen to the Greek patriots. The seeress of the Pythian shrine had given them a verse. The ego shall see, watching from the skies, the conquered weep while a conqueror dies. Unmistakably, this prophecy meant the Macedonian invaders would mourn Philip, who would be killed in the coming war. Well, how often is something like that true? And if you don't name the individuals, oh, well, whoever the ruler is that dies. Unmistakably, our hero. Unmistakably, this prophecy meant by the driving force of his emotions, Demosthenes got his army of patriots. He got it into the field by persuading the Athenians that their advantage lay in making war as far as possible from their city, and by shaming the Thebans to become allies of the Athenians. And in these Thebans lied the strength of the allies. The Theban phalanx formed 16 ranks under guidance of Epaminondas, had overthrown, and even the celebrated Spartans. The Theban sacred band of hoplites, devoted to a life of war, was believed to be supreme on the battlefield. So, reassuring, promising, inspiring, the great orator marched towards Macedon. That year, with his citizen soldiers, who seemed to him to be the resurrection of the democratic power, he marched with the hoplites, his bronze shield on his arm, his only insignia of rank, the gold letters on his shield, spelling "with fortune." Fortune, luck, we don't necessarily have to think of these terms in superstitious ways, but... And from that moment, Demosthenes ceased to exert any more influence upon the event that the hoplites trudging beside him, Philip the trickster, the play actor, and consummate commander of men, made his presence felt. The Macedonian army disappeared. At least it cannot be found by the Greeks, who advanced in high spirits when they intercepted a message that Philip had departed for the Balkans. The Greek citizen soldiers were bewildered when they discovered that Philip was actually behind them with his Macedonians. The message had been a simple trick. Anxious and tired, the Greeks hurried down out of the mountains into the long valley near Chaeronea. And found the Macedonians there. Even then, these Macedonians did not seem like an army ranged for battle. They moved at ease along the valley, not crowded together, and they seemed to have no servants or baggage. They stopped and sat down as if waiting for the foot-weary Greeks to hurry into formation against them. Far out on the Macedonian flank files of horses moved through a grove, led by men sheathed in bronze down to the hips. They did not look at all dangerous. The Greeks hurried on. The sacred band of Thebes went into its phalanx, past a small temple dedicated to Heracles, past the village of Chaeronea. They went towards the winding stream that divided them from the horsemen waiting at this rendezvous. By mid-afternoon, the sun was in the eyes of the horsemen. They had mounted, but they still waited on the rise among the scattered oaks. These companions, all Macedonians, all and noble-born, had been put, all 3 regiments of them, under the command of Parmenio, chief of staff. From past experience, they knew that Parmenio would wait for Philip's order to advance, but no such order had come from the lame leader, who was off somewhere in the battle, opposite the Theban phalanx. From the sounds on their left, the companions judged the Macedonians there had given way and were moving back up the slope. That meant the Thebans had not been checked. The strain of waiting told on the armored horsemen, even though they were accustomed to it. Through the trees and the drifting dust, they could only see that the small regiment of pacists or aides was engaged on their left. At times, clouds of Kiltan Cretan bowmen moved across the slope in front of them, screening them. The level sun, striking into the dust, made it difficult to see more than that. Relentlessly, the riders adjusted the shield straps on their cramped arms, shifting their weight, not speaking because they were listening intently. Nonetheless, they would have waited in ranks until a command reached them. If one rider had not broken ranks, if this rider had not been Alexander, the son of Philip, Alexander had waited on the black horse until his nerves jumped and tore at him. He had been assigned to the companions with Hephaestion, with the rank of regimental commander, though Philotas, the experienced son of Parmenio, actually commanded the regiment. Besides Alexander, a big warrior set his horse patiently. One Clytus, called the Black, because most of his body was burned to the hue of charred wood by the sun. Clytus had been told off to guard Alexander's body, so he stationed himself knee to knee with him, pushing Bucephalus over when the black horse moved restlessly. Clytus the Black had no more nerves than an oak tree. But Alexander strained to keep his bare knees from quivering. He wiped the drip of sweat from his right hand, tortured by anticipation of plunging into the maelstrom beyond the drifting dust, where sounds rose and fell like the pounding of surf. He breathed quickly, his throat dry. This grip of fear upon him was like a chain, tightening with each moment, and with the glare of the sunlight against his eyes, behind him he felt that other riders were watching him. Noticing how he is being overmastered by fear. Cold gripped his stomach, nauseating him until he had to swallow and cough to keep from retching. Lazily, Black Clytus picked at a scab covering a scar on one brown arm, and the noise beyond the trees changed to the screaming of gulls, but there could be no seagulls screaming here. Alexander had to move to hold down the rising sickness, jerking at the rein of the black horse. He tightened his knees, and Bucephalus plunged ahead. Clytus called out something on a tree branch, whipped across his face. He flung up his shield, bending down as he passed a group of archers who looked over their shoulders, startled. Other horses followed after him, but he could not see them. Metal grated against his shield, and Bucephalus swerved so that he had to grip hard with his knees. Suddenly he felt the horse rise in a jump. A knot of men rolled and crouched against the ground beneath him. He realized how fast he was going and tried to steady the frantic horse. Through the dust, a group of men took shape, standing as if pressed together, turning a line of spear points towards him. Crouching behind his shield, he felt the black horse stumble and lurch, and then race on, fighting for his head. Two wounded men, sitting back to back, held out open hands to him, making a sign. When at last Alexander was able to rein in the black horse, he found himself deep in brush at the edge of a stream. Listening, he heard no voices over the humming in his ears, but he felt desperately thirsty and dismounted to limp to the water. Wrapping the rein around his wrist, lying down, he drank, and then shoved his head into the water. When he wiped his eyes clear, he saw Bucephalus drinking beside him, so he waited for the horse to finish. He was breathing hastily now, and the sickness had left him, but he did not want to move. Somewhere beyond the encircling brush, voices echoed and carts creaked. He then noticed that the sky had changed, the glare had gone, and the clouds over the hill were darkening. He stretched his arms and got on the horse, turning back through the break in the brush. When he reached a path, he followed it, through an orchard, past a white stone temple, where men lay as if flung into piles, motionless. Alexander could make out only objects moving against the afterglow of the sunset. He tried to account for the missing hours, but could not. Over this cluttered land, he realized the battle must have passed. It had disappeared now, except for the watchfires that winked into light ahead of him. A man moved jerkily over the ground, bending down when he heard a voice from the wounded. Alexander noticed him because a squad of armored shield bearers moved methodically behind the erratic searcher, and then he saw it was Philip. His father peered at him and yelped, "Praise to the Almighty gods," he said. Well, at least what he thought was a god, right? Thought were gods. He gripped Alexander, felt him over for injuries, and hugged him. Philotas swore you vanished into the village, as if snatched up by a demon. They couldn't find your body. Now I'll give gold to thieving Duffy. Philip was royally drunk. Suddenly he swore, "Boy, what made you start the companion regiments off without an order?" Parmenio had no order. It wasn't time. They said they followed Philotas, and Philotas says he followed you. What devil possessed you, eh? Or could be a way they say it in the Greek. I don't know. I was frightened. Philip turned his scarred head to peer at his son, his breath reeking of wine, frightened. Don't say that. It wasn't easy on Chaeronea ridge. Parmenio looked like a ghost. I was scared through my guts. You can't escape that before an action. Only keep your head clear until your work's done. Relief flooded through Alexander, who had dreaded his father's anger. It seemed that Philip felt what he had experienced in the oak grove. Suddenly, Philip began to curse, peering into the darkness. Too many men had died in those hours. No such battle as this should have been fought. It was the fault of the charge of the companions before the turn in the battle.